Mick Mars, the guitarist who contributed to the current state of Mötley Crüe. He became the band's silent musical soul with his emotionally charged playing, spine-tingling riffs, and incredible perseverance. Mick Mars had ankylosing spondylitis from birth, thus he didn't walk with pride and ease. He had a remarkable, unflinching resolve and walked with quiet. Few people were aware that the man quietly standing in the corner of the stage was in excruciating pain while the Mötley Crüe's sold-out performances and world-shaking tunes went viral. 40 years of arduous labor. One singer devoted his entire life to the cause, but the brothers he formerly stood with in a well-known band were enraged and filed a lawsuit against him, pushing him aside. Where's Mick Mars now? He was formerly Mötley Crüe's musical soul, but he's now but a shadow. After being betrayed, what gave him the courage to stand up and go it alone? Let's begin with the narrative of Mick Mars. Childhood. Mick Mars was born into a working-class family in Terre Haute, Indiana, on May 4, 1951. Robert Allen Deal was his true name. In pursuit of a better life, his parents, Tina and Frank Deal, relocated the family to Garden Grove, California, when he was a little child. Growing up with his four brothers in that tiny house was anything from stable for Mars. From an early age, Mars was unique. At the age of 3, he attended a little performance at a local fair. The image of the country musician Scur Bond, his guitar gleaming in the light, lingered in the young boy's mind. When they returned home, Mars made it obvious that this would be his life. His parents gifted him an inexpensive first guitar when he was 12 years old. But for Mars, it was everything. Listening to every Elvis Presley album and surf rock artists like Dick Dale, Mars spent hours learning how to play. Other children were occupied with parties and sports. However, his body began to behave abnormally at the same moment. At the age of 14, Mars began experiencing acute sensations at the base of his spine. He didn't want to discuss them with anyone because he couldn't grasp them. He had a petite frame, a slightly bent back, and a music-filled mind while he was in his teens and attended school. He became a member of the Jades, an amateur cover band that sang Beatles songs. He began by playing bass, but soon moved to lead guitar. From late evenings in CD bars to school concerts, Mars spent every dollar honing his craft. His dream came at high cost. When he was little over 18, he was involved in an industrial accident that severely injured his hand. His singing career nearly ended before it even began because of this accident. Mars, however, chose a different path for the guitar, the only item that truly mattered to him. He walked away from a secure existence, resigned his job, and stopped attending school. In the backdrop, his illness was worsening. The anguish increased, but Mars continued to stand on the platforms of ancient bars, his hands still playing every note, his face contorted with agony. When most people were only emerging from their childhood fantasies, Mick Mars understood what was happening. He wouldn't consider the music industry to be a game. There would be conflict. He was a frail boy whose body was slowly failing and whose hands were injured. However, he refused to abandon the world he had selected. When it seemed like everything was against Mick Mars, why didn't he give up? Early in the workday, Mick Mars had several issues and failed numerous times at his early job. After quitting his work as a laborer, Mars joined small bar bands that performed in CD bars and blues rock venues throughout Southern California. One dinner was hardly covered by the meager sum. One of the most well-known bands of the period was White Horse. This was the band that made Mars well-known in the underground rock scene of Los Angeles. Mars soon gained recognition for his fast-paced guitar playing, note-for-note riffs, and emotionally charged improvised solos. Some even included his name alongside that of Eddie Van Halen, another well-known guitarist in the city at the time. However, the dream is dashed by business objectives. When White Horse decided to go disco to keep up with the times, Mars immediately quit. He knew quite well that he was not made to do as the market dictated. For him, there must have been something more substantial and genuine. Before realizing he required a complete overhaul, Mars released a few failed songs and performed with several pop groups in the next years. He dyed his hair dark black, cut off his well-known mustache, and altered his look to make him appear anything but amiable. The most significant action he took was to publicly adopt the name Mick Mars instead of Robert Allendale. His music and himself were given a fresh start as a result. Two young, enthusiastic musicians named Nicky Six and Tommy Lee contacted Mars shortly after he posted an advertisement in the Recycler newspaper in April 1980 that said, "Loud, rude, aggressive guitarist available." They immediately felt the icy demeanor, piercing stare, and deafeningly loud noises of Mars. Additionally, Mars came up with the moniker Mötley Crüe based on an old comment about how the crew of White Horse looked like a variety of different people. Their moniker swiftly became a symbol, as did their rebellious appearance and passionate voice. The other members realized they had located the missing piece and that it could not be replaced when Mars pressed the mute button on his guitar during those initial practices. Mars was more than just a musician. The band was going to explode in ways they could never have predicted, and he was its heart and soul. Three young males in their 20s who are desperate for attention are standing next to a man in his early 30s who is limping due to back discomfort. Would he be able to guide them to the top in addition to keeping up? As soon as they were formed in 1981, their metal crew's career took off. At the time, there were a lot of heavy metal bands on the Sunset Strip, but Mötley Crüe's raw sound, rebellious appearance, and belligerent attitude made them stand out. But few speak the truth. During those early years, Mick Mars's deep, icy guitar tone had a significant role in the band's sound. Their debut album, Too Fast for Love, was released in 1981. It had Mars' mark on it and was initially self-released. Simple yet catchy riffs and powerful hooks served as the foundation for the band's wild yet organic approach. The Mötley Crüe immediately became well-known thanks to this single, and they signed with Elektra Records in 1982. The true major break came in 1983 with Shout at the Devil. Mars produced a darker, heavier sound, incorporating heavy metal elements into mainstream hard rock songs. His ability to create riffs with only a few notes that could take over a stage was evident in songs like Looks That Kill and Too Young to Fall in Love. From 1985 to 1987, the Mötley Crüe was at the top of their game in terms of sales. Mars' ballad Home, Sweet Home from his 1985 album Theater of Pain is propelled by his melancholic guitar textures and subdued chords. Girls, Girls, Girls elevated the band's bad boy persona to a whole new level in 1987. Particularly on songs like Wild Side and You're All I Need, Mars' playing was gritty and blues-influenced. The band's best-selling album, Dr. Feelgood, debuted in 1989 and reached the top of the Billboard 200. When Bob Rock produced it, the Crüe sound improved. On songs like Kickstart My Heart and Without You, Mars displayed the height of his skill and passion, blending soulful, fluid solos with raw strength. Mick Mars was more than just a guitarist during all of this. He served as Mötley Crüe's musical cornerstone, keeping the group's sound together while the other members resorted to drug and alcohol abuse and media controversies. Tommy Lee and Nicky Six were frequently the focus of interviews. The band's face was Vince Neil. On stage and in the studio, Mick Mars was the one who turned their pandemonium into vibrant music. In the meantime, his body was still being ravaged by ankylospondylitis. After each tour, Mars moved more slowly and became more slumped every year. Fighting agony that persisted until dawn, he quietly went back to his hotel room while his bandmates partied into the night. Mick Mars rarely took part in the exciting adventures of Mötley Crüe, which is a little-known fact. The only member who avoided significant scandals was him. However, as a result, the distance between him and the other members of the band widened. Success arrived in a flash. Mick Mars, however, had to fight two battles throughout those years, one for his profession and another for his life itself. Pain, illness, and isolation. Mick Mars's body moved in the other direction as Mötley Crüe rose higher in the charts. Ankylosing spondylitis, a chronic kind of arthritis that gradually fuses the spine, was identified in him at the age of 17. It started with boring backaches, followed by restless nights and mornings when he had to use all of his might just to get out of bed. In addition to limiting his range of motion, the illness gradually distorted his body, forcing Mars to stoop and lose about 7 centimeters of height. Mars, however, never mentioned the agony of performing. He stood with his head lowered and his guitar in his hands like it was a substitute spine for the body that was slowly disintegrating as the lights came on. Each tour was a real struggle. Endless hours on a tour bus, lengthy flights, and consecutive performances. For a guy whose spine was falling vertebra by vertebra, each was a nightmare. Mars, however, hardly grumbled. Rather, he bore the agony in quiet, concealing it beneath a tough veneer. Mars led a tranquil life in contrast to his comrades, who overindulged in drugs, drink, and never-ending parties. Vince Neil wasn't close to him. There was no link between him and Tommy Lee. Other than the music, he didn't share anything with Nikki Sixx. Mick Mars was effectively a lone man in the band he helped form for more than 20 years. Mars acknowledged that he had experienced a deep depression in his book, The Dirt. He finally developed an addiction to opiate pills after drinking excessively to dull the discomfort. Mars even went into the ocean one night in a frantic attempt to put a stop to everything, only to wake up shivering and drenched, unsure if he was still alive or already a ghost. He eventually had to have hip replacement surgery in the 1990s due to his disease. The loneliness persisted even after the agony diminished. The only member who wasn't hounded by the press or featured on magazine covers was Mick Mars. Even though his guitar was what really kept the band's spirit alive, he was perceived by the audience as the odd one, the quiet one, and the shadow of the silent crew. A conflict spanning over 40 years, battling against illness, loneliness, treachery, and legal battles, as well as battling to be heard without ever giving up. After more than 40 years of fighting with his band and a crippling disease, Mick Mars had to make a tough choice in 2022. Discontinue touring since his health could no longer support it. However, he made it apparent that he was not leaving the band and that he was prepared to record, play at events that were stationary, and take part in any activities that didn't involve a lot of travel. The Mötley Crüe informed the media a day later that John 5 would take Mars' place as he retired. Just a chilly announcement. No debate, no compromise. McMar was aware that he had been shoved out, and he decided to speak up this time. Mars sued the band in the Superior Court of Los Angeles at the beginning of 2023. He claimed that Tommy Lee, Vince Neil, and Nikki Sixx, his former bandmates, were plotting to take him out of his business ventures and force him to sell his 25% ownership in the firm that runs the Mötley Crüe brand. A cheap price. Mars also claimed that the band's financial records had been purposefully hidden for years and sought complete access to them. The lawsuit's disclosures were shocking. Mars claimed that all of the bass tracks on Nikki SIXS tour were pre-recorded and that they weren't played live. Additionally, he asserted that Tommy Lee's percussion and Vince Neil's vocals were heavily dependent on backing recordings. In order to acquire his stake, Mars claimed that Sixx misused his power, minimized his skills, and led the attempt to declare him unfit to work. Financial betrayal was not the only aspect of it. Mars was humiliated personally as well. His age, his health, and even his personal relationships were all made fun of. The location he had once referred to as his musical family was now attempting to destroy him. The band retaliated, saying that any member who stopped touring forfeited their portion of touring earnings and associated activities under prior agreements. They maintained that Mars was no longer eligible to stay. However, money wasn't the only consideration for Mars. It has to do with dignity. It was about his entitlement to be honored for a legacy he had given his life and health to create. A partial victory swung in Mars' favor following months of court fights. The court upheld Mötley Crüe's right to view the business records that were banned until 2022 and ordered him to pay his legal bills for postponing the delivery of data. Even while the legal battle is still ongoing, Mick Mars made one point very plain. He will not remain mute and allow what is rightfully his to be taken away. He will continue to fight as he has throughout his life, even if he is abandoned and stand alone, restarting a career on your own. For Mick Mars, leaving Mötley Crüe was not the end. It marked the start of the most significant phase of his professional life, changing the narrative of his own existence. Mars discreetly withdrew inside his Nashville private studio shortly after the lawsuit with Crue broke out. He made the decision to do something he hadn't been able to do for more than 40 years, free from the constraints of image, market trends, and commercial expectations. An unadulterated and unedited pure Mars solo album. On February 23rd, 2024, the album The Other Side of Mars was formally released. Mars conveyed a clear message only from the title. The public has never seen this side of him before. From songwriting to arrangement to hand-picking his collaborators, Mars was actively involved in every step of the album's nearly 4-year production. He invited co-workers and close friends. Former Winger and Alice Cooper keyboardist Paul Taylor co-wrote a number of the songs and was instrumental in forming the composition's framework. The majority of the lead vocals were performed by former Lenham and Adler member Jacob Bunton, who gave the project a new yet intensely emotive sound. The album also had Korn drummer Ray Luzier on a number of tracks, which gave the rhythm section more vigor. The record, which was produced by Michael Wagner, who had previously collaborated with Mötley Crüe during the Too Fast for Love period, maintained its unadulterated, unrefined vibe without going overboard with gloss. The Other Side of Mars did not adhere to the traditional hair metal formula in terms of music. Mars combined blues rock, hard rock, and a dash of contemporary industrial. His skill to write riffs was evident in songs like Right Side of Wrong and Loyal to the Lie. Cold, heavy but intensely feeling, like Memories, ballads showed another aspect. A mature, introspective, and wise Mick Mars in his own right. Mars' guitar tone was distinctively thick, dark, and incredibly deep throughout the album. His solos lacked ostentatious technicality. They concentrated only on unadulterated passion, which Mars had always regarded as more important than quickness or flamboyance. Rock critics gave the album high marks, with Mick Mars saying in rare interviews, "I'm not trying to sound like anyone else. I don't have anything to prove. I just want to play the way I want to, honestly, without apologies." It is regarded by many as one of the most genuine pieces a seasoned artist has produced in the past 10 years. Mick Mars accomplished something that he had never been able to do in all of his years in Mötley Crüe with The Other Side of Mars, narrating his own tale and having complete control over his music and future. Mick Mars finally entered the spotlight on his own terms, no longer having to hide in anyone's shadow or endure the suffering in quiet. Private life. Offstage, Mick Mars' life was never as loud as the music he performed. It was silent, intricate, and full of voids that were difficult to fill. Mars married his adolescent sweetheart, Sharon Deal, at a relatively young age, even before the Motley Crüe was created. They had 2 children together, Stormy Deal, who would later inherit her father's fight with ankylosing spondylitis, and Les Paul Deal, named after the renowned guitar inventor. However, the first marriage reached its breaking point due to the difficult years of playing in low-cost bars and the crippling weight of financial strain. Mars was left to struggle with music and unpaid child support problems after Sharon left with their kids as the Motley group started to take together. Mick Mars once faced immediate jail time for unpaid child support if the cops stopped him. During that time, friends recalled that in order to keep him from getting arrested in between traffic stops, they had to devise ways to get around it. In addition, Mars had another son, Eric Deal, during those turbulent years as a result of a brief romance with local band vocalist Marshall Martel. But Mick's absence during Eric's formative years left holes that would be challenging to fill. Even when Mötley Crüe became well-known in the 1980s, Mars' personal life continued to be erratic. He remarried in 1990 to backing vocalist Emmy Cannon, who had toured with the group. However, due to internal band strife, this marriage also ended after only 4 years. Additionally, Mars suffered more than just monetary losses from both marriages as his physical and emotional suffering worsened. They left behind shards of memories, places he could not cling to, and children he could not be near. Only in 2007, after more than half of his life was over, did Mars discover a different kind of anchor, Serena Schwinberger, a Swiss model who was more than 30 years his junior. After a show in Zurich, they got together. The quiet yet commanding presence of Mars, a guy who was almost 60 years old and whose eyes were still burning fiercely behind heavy shades, drew in Serena, who was only 22 at the time. When they got married in 2013, Mick Mars had a companion for the first time. Not because he was famous or wealthy, but just because they lead a private life in Nashville, hidden from the media and the old scars of the entertainment industry. Mars records and composes music there, and he and his young wife enjoy peaceful walks, occasionally holding a cane, and other times simply grinning thoughtfully. Distance still characterizes his relationship with his kids. The oldest son, Les Paul, who continues his father's musical career, keeps a tighter relationship. Stormy and Eric, meanwhile, have opted for more subdued lifestyles and maintain a certain distance from their father. I missed out on too many things that I can never get back. There are losses that don't make noise. There are wounds that cannot be measured by money or success. Despite his icy exterior, Mars' personal life is a series of silent collapses that also serve as a testament to the quiet strength of a man who chose to get back up every time without saying a word. This was his straightforward response in a rare interview when asked what he regrets most. Present-day existence and legacy as we enter 2024. Mick Mars reached a new professional milestone. His first solo album, The Other Side of Mars, was published on February 23, 2024 by his own label, 1313 LLC, in association with MRI. After leaving Mötley Crüe, Mars truly made a comeback with this entirely autonomous musical endeavor. With hits like Loyal to the Lie, Undone, and Right Side of Wrong, the album immediately won praise from both reviewers and listeners. The Other Side of Mars maintained Mars' distinctive guitar tone, thick, icy, and intensely emotional, while adopting a more contemporary vibe. Mars demonstrated a significant shift in his musical thought by combining classic hard rock with contemporary elements without being constrained by outdated formulas. He demonstrated that his creative spark was far from gone despite his advanced age. Not content to stop there, Mick Mars revealed in 2025 that he has already started recording his second solo album. He disclosed that the next project would have a more expansive and adventurous sound, marking a step up from his debut. In order to do this, they collaborated with engineer Chris Collier, who is well known for creating contemporary recordings that capture the essence of the performer. Mick Mars and his spouse, Serena Schoenberger, now live peacefully in Nashville, away from the bustle of the entertainment business. He continues to produce in quiet without the use of stage lights, spending the most of his time composing, recording, and attending to his health. Despite his legal struggles with Mötley Crüe, Mars hasn't completely ruled out any future partnerships. However, his solo career is currently his top priority, a voyage in which he is genuinely in charge for the first time. In terms of his legacy, Mick Mars has left behind more than just powerful solos and riffs. Throughout the band's most difficult years, he played a crucial role in defining Mötley Crüe's sound and keeping them rooted in their musical identity. His impact can be seen in the hard rock musicians of later generations, as well as the hair metal bands of the 1980s. Above all, Mars's narrative is one of tenacity. An artist who overcame illness, aging, and treachery to continue performing and living his life as he saw fit. Motley Crüe was never represented by Mick Mars. With his icy, unrelenting guitar, he was the one who kept the band anchored with a true musical spirit for more than 40 years, even if he wasn't the one carrying the microphone or driving the audience into a frenzy. Mars continues to write, play, and go ahead on legs that appear to be worn down by illness at an age when many people have long since left the spotlight. He silently makes his imprint on his own road without the desire for praise or sympathy, a quest that never compromises integrity or steadfastness. Mick Mars's life serves as a straightforward but potent example. Making a difference doesn't require being a loud person. Silence, persistence, and self-loyalty can sometimes make the most effect. Have you ever spoken up for what you believed in a quiet way, like Mick Mars has done throughout his life? If so, please leave a comment below with your opinions. Additionally, remember to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any more inspirational real-life stories.